In the summer of 532 CE, the city of Constantinople, crown jewel of the Byzantine Empire, stood glittering on the Bosporus Strait, a city of marble, silk, and intrigue. By then, the Eastern Roman world had endured centuries of wars and revolutions, and under the rule of Emperor Justinian I, it was undergoing one of the most ambitious transformations in history. Great architectural projects were underway, the empire's laws were being rewritten, and Rome's former provinces were being reconquered by Byzantine armies. Yet, amid this apparent strength and splendor, one single week of chaos would nearly bring the empire to its knees. What began as a chariot race would explode into one of the most violent urban riots the ancient world had ever witnessed, the Nika Revolt. Imagine the scene. Tens of thousands of voices echoing through the Hippodrome, that vast crescent-shaped stadium capable of holding more than 100,000 spectators. The rhythmic thunder of hooves fills the air as teams charge past. The people scream themselves hoarse, banners of blue and green waving above the crowds, and the roar of the mob drowns out every other sound. But these were not mere sporting factions. The blues and the greens were power blocks, part gangs, part political machines, part cults of fanatic loyalty. And when their emotions collided with the pressures of imperial politics, Constantinople became an inferno. Our story begins a few years earlier, when Justinian ascended to the throne in 527 CE. Born a peasant in the Balkan province of Dardania, Justinian had climbed the ranks in the capital, thanks to his uncle, Emperor Justin I. Intelligent, meticulous, and ruthlessly ambitious, he saw himself as the heir of Augustus and Constantine, a man destined to restore Rome to its former majesty. His vision was imperial unity, Christian orthodoxy, and total centralization of power. Beside him stood an equally extraordinary figure, Empress Theodora. Once an actress and courtesan in the Hippodrome circuit, realms close to the very chariot factions that would one day riot, Theodora had transformed herself into a shrewd, articulate partner in rule. She was no silent consort. She was his counselor, sometimes his moral compass, often his iron will. Their bond would prove decisive in the chaos to come. The Byzantine capital was, as always, a powder keg. Constantinople's population was a mix of rich and poor, Greeks and non-Greeks, Christians and heretics, bureaucrats and beggars. The city vibrated with contradictions. Monumental churches rising alongside sprawling slums, senators arguing philosophy while street gangs battled over team colors. The Hippodrome, core of urban life, was not just a sports arena but a stage for political theater. The blues and greens, ostensibly racing clubs, acted as social networks and pressure groups. They had patrons among the elites and sympathizers in the imperial palace. That meant the emperor ignored them at his peril. By 532, the city's tension was reaching a breaking point. Justinian's constant wars and massive building projects had drained the treasury. To refill it, he imposed new taxes that fell heavily on merchants and commoners. His chief advisors, John the Cappadocian and Tribonian, were capable administrators, but widely despised for corruption and arrogance. Meanwhile, famine had struck recently, and an outbreak of plague loomed. To ordinary citizens, Justinian's glorious reforms meant hardship, and resentment festered. At the same time, the intense rivalry of the chariot factions had become politicized. The blues were associated loosely with Orthodox Christianity and old Roman aristocracy, the greens with the common people and opposing theological groups. Yet these boundaries were porous. Intrigue and personal loyalty ran stronger than ideology. Fistfights between fans, brawls in alleys, and assassinations were regular occurrences. On race days, even the emperor's throne, overlooking the Hippodrome from the imperial box, sat within a bubbling cauldron of passion. Then came January, in the year of our story. The city was preparing for a new round of games. A few days earlier, a violent clash had left several members of both the blue and green factions condemned to death. On January 10, the authorities attempted to carry out the executions. But through a mixture of incompetence and sympathy from guards, 2 men, one blue, one green, escaped and fled into a nearby church, claiming sanctuary. When Justinian refused to grant clemency, both factions, for once united by anger against the emperor, began to chant a single cry at the next race: Nika, conquer. At first, the emperor may have thought their chants were simply a call to their teams, but the voices grew louder, darker, their rhythm changing from celebration to threat. Nika! Nika filled the Hippodrome like a war drum, until the roar became indistinguishable from the sound of rebellion. Suddenly stones are thrown, torches light up, the guards are attacked, and the wildest riot in Constantinople's history ignites. For 5 days, Constantinople ceases to be a city of marble and becomes one of fire. The mob, now tens of thousands strong, surges through the streets, shouting the rebel cry. They storm prisons and free captives, they besiege the praetorium, they set government buildings ablaze. The city watch, unable to cope, withdraws. Half of Constantinople burns. The air fills with smoke so thick that day turns to night. The rioters' rage, at first unfocused, soon takes aim. Justinian must be dethroned. Senators, humiliated by his reforms, join the uprising, thinking they can restore their own influence by choosing a new ruler. They select Hypatius, nephew of a former emperor, as a figurehead. For a brief moment, the ancient Roman disease, civil war over succession, returns in the blink of an eye. The mobs acclaim Hypatius emperor in the Hippodrome, while Justinian barricades himself in the palace, staring aghast at the inferno outside. Inside the great palace, panic reigns. Ministers plead for retreat. Many suggest fleeing the city by sea. The imperial docks remain under control. The emperor, shaken, may have been ready to abdicate. But Theodora stands unmoved. According to the historian Procopius, who, though often hostile to her, recorded this moment, she gave one of the most iconic speeches in all imperial history. She declared that flight was not an option, that the imperial purple made a good burial shroud. In essence, she told Justinian and his generals to die with dignity rather than flee in disgrace. Those words, whether exactly as written or not, transformed the emperor's despair into determination. Reinvigorated, Justinian summoned his two most capable commanders, Belisarius, the young general destined to reconquer half the lost Western Empire, and Mundus, a veteran officer loyal to the core. They organized a brutal plan to crush the revolt. The rebels were gathering again in the Hippodrome, shouting for Hypatius. Under secret orders, the gates were sealed. Then the imperial troops, battle-hardened soldiers from the palace guard and returning legions, advanced from different entrances. It happened fast. Trapped in their own sanctuary, the rebels realized too late what was occurring. Belisarius's men charged in, sword and spear flashing, cutting down anyone in their path. Panic turned to slaughter. The historian John Malalas estimated 30,000 people were killed that day. Others put the number even higher. The water channels ran red through the racecourse where champions once rode. By nightfall, the revolt was broken. When the sun rose over Constantinople the next morning, the city was irreparably changed. Smoke still curled from the ruins of homes, churches, and the Senate House. The once vibrant Hippodrome, heart of the Byzantine capital, was silent, filled with corpses. The emperor's soldiers scoured the streets, rounding up surviving leaders. Hypatius, dragged before the throne, pleaded for mercy. Justinian, remembering how close he had come to ruin, executed him and his brother. The senators who supported the revolt were stripped of property and titles. The destruction was stupendous. Nearly half the city lay in ashes. Yet from those ashes, Justinian would craft a new vision of empire. Within weeks, he ordered the rebuilding of Constantinople on a grander scale than ever before. The crown jewel of this rebirth was the Hagia Sophia, the Church of Holy Wisdom, where flames had reduced the old basilica to rubble. Now rose a monument to divine glory. Its huge dome, floating as if on light, would stand for centuries as the symbol of Byzantine might. The emperor poured his wealth, manpower, and will into the construction, determined that the glory of his reign would outlive the horrors of the riot. But the Nika Revolt was more than a violent episode. It was a turning point in imperial ideology. Before 532, Justinian had been one ambitious ruler among many. After the revolt, his rule hardened. The experience had taught him that the people's love was fickle, the Senate unreliable, and mercy dangerous. He centralized power further, reasserted imperial authority over church and state alike, and ruled with an almost godlike distance. Theodora, equally marked by the event, became a powerful advocate for women and the marginalized. A voice, some said, born from witnessing the fragility of life itself when mobs ruled the streets. In the years that followed, Justinian's reign achieved stunning triumphs. His general Belisarius reconquered vast territories, North Africa from the Vandals, Italy from the Ostrogoths, and parts of Spain from the Visigoths. His jurists compiled the Corpus Juris Civilis, the collection of Roman law that would shape all European legal systems to come. Constantinople's skyline glittered anew, richer after each project. And yet, woven into the emperor's achievements was the shadow of that January uprising, a reminder of how quickly an empire can pivot from stability to chaos. To truly understand why the Nika Revolt exploded, one must look deeper than the politics of Justinian's reign. The rebellion reflected the growing power that urban masses could wield in an empire too centralized to tackle its social contradictions. The blues and greens offered the people identity, a sense of belonging in a vast bureaucracy that otherwise ignored them. Their cries for victory on the track had long masked the roar of frustration simmering beneath imperial propaganda. The Hippodrome, where games were supposed to entertain and distract, instead became an arena of democracy's ghost, a place where commoners for an instant could chant their anger in the emperor's face. In that way, the Nika riot stands not just as an ancient riot, but as an early symbol of urban revolution. At its heart was the same combustible mix seen in later history: inequality, corruption, religious tension, and the intoxicating energy of crowds. Like Paris centuries later or cities during modern revolutions, Constantinople in 532 showed how quickly urban unity can shift from festivity to fury. And yet, apocalypse gave birth to rebirth. The violence that nearly ended Justinian's rule forged the resolve that enabled his golden age. The same iron will that executed thousands also built Hagia Sophia. The paradox of empire, its grandeur built atop tragedy, is fully embodied in this story. Archaeologists and historians today still trace signs of that week of fire beneath modern Istanbul. Layers of ash beneath the old palace quarter, signs of reconstruction in building foundations. Each mark a silent echo of the inferno. Records like those of Procopius and Malalas allow us to peer through the smoke of centuries. Their accounts, colored by bias and drama, still convey the immediacy of terror. An emperor pacing the halls of his palace, an empress speaking words that would become legend, and a populace driven by both desperation and adrenaline. Justinian himself, late in life, might have reflected on those days as both his greatest trial and formative test. The empire he ruled after 532 was stronger in appearance but more brittle at its foundation. The Nika Revolt showed that even autocracy depends on perception. The ruler's image can never falter. Theodora's memory would continue to shape imperial policy until her death in 548, and when plague struck Constantinople later that same decade, killing nearly half its inhabitants, the city's resilience again would be tested, perhaps tempered by the earlier horror. If one stands today within the cavernous interior of Hagia Sophia, the sound of chants rising into that monumental dome seems peaceful. Yet behind that beauty lies the echo of Nika, a cry that once nearly tore the empire apart. Each marble column, each glittering mosaic, is in a sense a reply to that fury, a monument not only to faith, but to survival. The intertwining of spectacle and politics that caused the revolt may feel archaic, but it remains hauntingly modern. Crowds still pour into arenas, parliaments still rely on popularity, and rulers still gamble between appeasing and confronting the voice of the masses. Constantinople's Hippodrome was, in that sense, a mirror of the human condition: our need to belong, our volatility when ignored, our simultaneous capacity for destruction and creation. Consider the irony. The arena built to embody Roman civilization's glory became the crucible of its most dangerous passions. When Justinian's architects rebuilt the city, they could not erase the memory of that paradox, nor could future emperors. Centuries later, when the Byzantines faced crusaders and later the Ottomans, chroniclers often invoked the Nika riot to remind rulers that threats within can burn brighter than those without. Throughout history, rulers have learned the same lesson. The streets matter. The cheers of the crowd can turn from celebration to condemnation in a heartbeat. From the Nika Revolt in 532 to the storming of the Bastille in 1789, the underlying rhythm is constant. When people feel silenced, their collective voice becomes thunder. But the revolt's legacy is not merely destruction. After suppressing it, Justinian devoted himself to making his empire a reflection of divine order, law, architecture, and learning harmonized as instruments of eternity. The same emperor who had nearly lost everything sought now to leave behind something deathless. In the luminous dome of Hagia Sophia, scholars see not only a symbol of Christian majesty but also a psychological victory over chaos. Solomon, I have surpassed thee, Justinian was said to have proclaimed at its completion. Whether truly spoken or apocryphal, the words capture the essence of his reign, an emperor forever proving or redeeming himself before God and history. The chariot factions dwindled after the revolt. Their power, broken by imperial decree, gradually reverted to mere sport. By the time later chroniclers wrote of the Hippodrome, its thunderous mobs had become a memory. Yet even reduced to ritual, the echoes lingered. Each race that followed carried whispers of those deadly chants. The empire had learned, never again could the factions be allowed to challenge the throne. Nevertheless, their story continued in subtler forms. In the monasteries, writings from both blues and greens preserved hymns and records of their members, proud of their survival despite imperial wrath. In folk tales, the courageous women who protected injured fugitives during the rioting became local heroines. The idea of defying authority, of shouting Nika in one's own small way, remained part of the city's folklore long after the fires burned out. From a historian's perspective, the Nika Revolt marks a unique intersection of civic identity, religion, sport, and political legitimacy, a kaleidoscope of human motivation. Some see it as a class uprising, others as mob madness, still others as a calculated conspiracy by disaffected elites. In truth, it was all of these at once. Like most eruptions of collective fury, it cannot be confined within tidy causes. It began over a grievance and became a statement on empire itself. When modern archaeologists peel away centuries of earth from the Hippodrome site, they unearth not just stones but stories. Beneath paving slabs lie remnants of torched wood, fragments of coins bearing Justinian's profile, shards of amphorae. Each piece is a frozen moment from the conflagration. In laboratories, carbon analysis matches those burnt layers precisely to the year 532. It's as though the earth itself remembers the night the city caught fire from within. To dramatize that ancient moment, imagine walking through the imperial palace during the riot's height. Flames flicker on the mosaic walls, sending red reflections through marble corridors. The emperor's retinue murmurs prayers. The empress stands tall amid trembling men, and outside, the mob chants beneath a haze of smoke. Bells clang as churches burn. The sea winds carry the smell of ash across the Bosporus. The water is filled with boats of refugees trying to flee. The cry, Nika, rides the wind, sometimes close, sometimes distant, but never ceasing. That mix of awe and horror is history's heartbeat. And then silence returns. Heavy, tragic, inevitable. Thousands lie dead. The city is scarred, but alive. Within months, scaffolds rise over ruins. Workers sing hymns as they mold new stones. On the horizon stands the skeleton of Hagia Sophia's colossal dome, curving like a promise above a wounded city. Out of the ashes grows majesty again, because humanity, no matter how much it burns, cannot help but rebuild. Centuries later, travelers from Venice, Persia, or the Arab world would gaze upon Constantinople and marvel at its radiance. Few of them realized that beneath those splendors lay the bones of 30,000 who died within the Hippodrome. The empire's magnificence had been paid for in blood, the city's glory purchased by despair. And yet that is the paradox of civilization. Destruction and creation dance together through time, indivisible. The Nika Revolt teaches us, across nearly 15 centuries, that history's grandest empires can teeter on the edge of collapse in a matter of days, and that sometimes survival itself becomes the seed of greatness. Justinian might not have rebuilt Rome's lost western half forever, but in reimagining Constantinople he achieved something more enduring, the creation of a cultural and spiritual capital that would outlast empires. The Hagia Sophia, the codified law, the surviving texts, all trace their lineage to those desperate January days when the empire burned and was reborn. As the historian Edward Gibbon later summarized, the massacre of the Hippodrome extirpated the factions and established the peace of the capital. Harsh, concise, perhaps too forgiving, but it captures the duality. The riot's suppression marked one of the deadliest acts of state violence in ancient history, yet it forged decades of uneasy stability. In the great continuum of human progress, power often walks hand in hand with tragedy. When we imagine ancient Byzantium, radiant arrays of mosaics and domes come to mind, but history is not built from beauty alone. It is built from fear overcome, from chaos restrained, from the choices made when all seems lost. In Theodora's defiance, in Justinian's resolve, and even in the doomed fury of the crowd chanting Nika, we glimpse the eternal drama of the human spirit confronting destiny. Thus, the story of the Nika Revolt endures not merely as an ancient riot, but as a testament to resilience, the ability of individuals and societies to rise again from ruin. Long after the echoes of those cries faded from the Hippodrome, their legacy endured in law, architecture, and legend. And as sunlight still filters through the golden dome of Hagia Sophia, it illuminates the silent truth whispered by history, that even amid ashes, humanity forever seeks to build something worthy of remembrance.